Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm sharing my lunches from the past week. I started off the week by making a pesto. I know I wanted to use this for a recipe I planned to shoot on Wednesday, but I wanted to make it in advance for all of the flavours to come out. And then I ended up using some for lunch this day too. I have the full recipe for my pesto in the description box below. I try to always make it with a pestle and mortar. I find it more rustic and authentic, but sometimes I'll blend it together in my food processor too. And then just stored that in a clip top jar. So then for Monday's lunch, I made harissa mushrooms with rice, hummus and flatbread. I had some mixed mushrooms, so I threw those into a pan with some olive oil and fried them off until nice and golden. I then added in a good heaped teaspoon of harissa paste and just coated the mushrooms in that. Made a quick salad too with some baby cucumbers, some cherry tomatoes and some thinly sliced red onion. Then I mixed that all together with a teaspoon of red wine vinegar and a good pinch of salt. I had these amazing atar flatbreads which I just warmed through and tore up. Used up some brown rice from the fridge that I had left over, and then I added on the harissa mushrooms, added on the salad and then some of the pesto on top of the salad, some hummus on the side as well, then squeezed over some lemon juice and added on some fresh coriander. I kind of just based this lunch around the leftover brown rice that I wanted to use up, but harissa mushrooms are one of my favourite things to have on toast or in wraps, and so this kind of all just came together. Loads of flavours and textures with the spicy harissa, the fried mushrooms, the atar flatbreads and the juicy, crunchy salad. It was a nice combination and just really fresh. I had that with my Bed and Blend peach soda and thyme cold brew. The recipe for this is over on my Instagram. On Tuesday I made some creamy courgette pasta. I first sliced up 2 cloves of garlic, then I picked a courgette from the garden. I read that these are best picked around 10 centimetres for more flavour and less of a watery texture than the larger ones. Sliced that up and then added in a little olive oil to a pan, then added in the garlic and courgette and just fried everything off for a couple of minutes. I then seasoned with some sea salt and black pepper and also added in a small handful of fresh spinach and left it on a low heat for the leaves to wilt. Made my sauce by adding half a block of silken tofu to my food processor, followed by the greens, then added in a handful of fresh basil leaves, grated in the zest of half a lemon and squeezed in the juice of half a lemon, and then I blended that up as smooth as possible. Set that aside and put some pasta on to cook. I reserved a little of the pasta water, then drained the pasta off, added it back to the pan and then gradually added in all of the sauce, stirring in between, and I poured in around 2 tablespoons of the pasta water. Seasoned with a bit more salt and pepper and kept stirring it until it all came together, and that was pretty much it. This is quite similar to my spinach, pea and basil pasta that I shared recently. The recipe for that is over on my blog, which I'll link to below, but instead of the peas I basically just used courgette this time. We have so many of these growing in the garden and this was a great way to use one up. As a smaller courgette it really did have more flavour. It was also a little sweeter, but paired with the silken tofu for creaminess and protein and the garlic and basil for flavour, it just made a really nice pasta sauce. On Wednesday I made a heirloom tomato and basil pesto galette. For the pastry I added 2 cups of spelt flour to a food processor, plain flour also works, then added in 3/4 of a cup of cold vegan butter cut into cubes. I just pulsed that together a few times just to break down the butter into smaller pieces, then tipped out the mixture into a mixing bowl and poured in a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar and 1/3 of a cup of cold water and just turned those through with a fork until it came together and began to form this kind of flaky pastry, as you can see here. Tipped that out onto a floured work surface and just moulded it into like a wheel shape and then set it in the fridge for 2 hours. I placed my pastry in a stasher bag and then squeeze out the air. These are great as reusable storage, especially for the freezer. I then covered a large plate in reusable kitchen towels and I set that to the side. I took 3 large tomatoes, 2 were red heirloom tomatoes and 1 was a large yellow one. but these work great for this. You can find them almost anywhere in the summer and they're so sweet and flavourful. Just sliced those up evenly, laid them out on my chopping board and seasoned really well with flaky sea salt. Then turned them over and placed them face down on the kitchen towels and then sprinkled flaky sea salt on the other side. This just helps to withdraw a lot of the moisture from the tomatoes and the towels soak it up too so that the galette doesn't get too wet. Set that to the side to soak in, and after 2 hours removed my dough from the fridge, placed it on a floured surface again and rolled it out as thinly as I could in a rough kind of oval shape. Around 1/2 centimetre in thickness is good. I preheated the oven to 200 degrees Celsius, then lined a baking tray and transferred the pastry onto that. I then used most of the pesto just spread in the centre of the base evenly, and I reserved some of the pesto for the top. I then placed on the tomatoes, just roughly laid these out and then built it up into 2 layers on top of each other. I then carefully just folded the edges up and over onto the tomatoes and gently pressed them down. And I used a little oat milk just washed over the pastry edges to help it go a nice golden colour and slightly crispy in the oven. I then placed that in the oven to bake for around 45 minutes until the tomatoes have roasted nicely and the pastry is crispy and a lovely colour. I then used up the rest of the pesto and just dotted that randomly over the top. I grated the zest of around half a lemon on and then just picked some fresh basil leaves and tore them over the top too. Sliced it up. This was going to be for dinner. I ended up having a slice of it for lunch because I couldn't resist, and then we had the rest later, but this is a recipe I really wanted to make for the blog, so you can find it over there now. I love making galettes. They're so fun. I also have a red pesto, sweet potato and chickpea one too, which I can link to. There's also a few different ways to make the pastry too, but I think this way works best. And I like using spelt for the higher protein content. It's almost somewhere between a quiche and a pizza. The crusty pastry with the fresh tomatoes and basil pesto is so delicious. Great in the summer and perfect for things like picnics too. On Thursday, I had one of my standard lunches of scrambled tofu, toast, mushrooms and avocado. I first sliced up another heirloom tomato which I had, put a slice of bread in the toaster to toast, and then once done, spread on some hummus, and on top of that I spread on a little harissa. I then added on the sliced heirloom tomato and I heated a little olive oil in a pan, then added in a handful of mixed mushrooms. I think I had oyster, shiitake and chestnut, but any will do. Seasoned with a little salt and pepper, and once nicely golden, I then added them on top of the toast. I made up some of my scrambled tofu with the leftover other half of the silken tofu from Tuesday's lunch. I usually add in paprika, garlic granules, turmeric, salt and pepper, and just scramble it together. Had that on the side, and I'd also sliced up half an avocado. I put some salt, pepper and chili flakes on top of that, and then added a little calamari to the tofu scramble, which gives it an eggy flavour. Also added on some hot sauce, and I had this with a cup of tea because it's always the best with this kind of lunch. This was the Bird and Blend custard cream tea. I'm trying out some of their biscuit flavoured teas at the moment, and they're great. Add in a little oat milk to that, and that was it. As I said, this is a go-to kind of lunch for me in some way or another. It's just quick, easy, and there's a bit of everything which all works well together. It also just meant using up some of the ingredients that I had in the fridge, such as the leftover silken tofu, the mushrooms, tomatoes and hummus. But yeah, lots of flavours and textures that always go together nicely, and washed down with a nice cup of milky tea. It's not the most summery lunch, but it's still the best. And finally, on Friday, I made these harissa mushroom flatbreads. Again, used up the rest of the mushrooms that I had in the fridge, and I just fried those off until nice and golden and brown in a little olive oil. I then added a heaped teaspoon of harissa and just stirred it through the mushrooms to coat them all in it. I had another one of these atar flatbreads to use up, so I warmed it through in the toaster, then spread on some hummus down the centre. Added on some shredded lettuce, then placed on the harissa fried mushrooms. I'd made a similar, really simple salad to the one that I made on Monday, just cherry tomatoes, baby cucumber and red onion with red wine vinegar, but I chopped it up really finely this time. Added that on too, topped it with some vegan yogurt and a little more harissa, and then finished it with lots of chopped fresh coriander. Realised this was going to be a challenge to eat, so I sliced it in half. Made a bit of a mess, but it tasted great, and messy meals are the best kind. The flavours of those spicy harissa mushrooms with the cool hummus and the yogurt together with the fresh salad and that atar flatbread. It was all so delicious and a really easy lunch to just throw together. And that was it for my week of lunches. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Recipes linked below, and I will see you again soon. Bye!